Tracy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the only ACA show that encourages wearing costumes all year round. I'm your host, John Wick. Joining me, of course, is the Mad Hatter, and in all the way from Damascus, Death. For our podcast audience, that's Christy, V, and Serafina. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Oh my gosh. Happy Halloween,
Happy Halloween.
guys, and blessed Samhain.
Thank all of y'all for joining us as you're handing out candy or whatever else as you go about your week. We, of course, are going to be talking about some of our scariest, spookiest horror stories. You know, things like sex ed in this country and trying to find a partner. So if you have any great, terrible first dates, if you've had a run-in with sex ed, if you've had a certain somebody try and slide into your DMs unrequested with some extra special nastiness, please give us a call. We're here at 512-686-0279. That number again is 512-686-0279. We would love to hear your stories. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the first one. Sarah, you wanted to tell us your sex ed horror story.
Yes. I will tell you.
You're disturbingly good at that.
Yeah, it's a good fit. Yeah. I don't know. I don't mean to imply anything about your personality. I'm just saying it's working for you. It's working.
Yes. When I was young, there was no sex ed to speak of, much like today in Texas.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes. I was not given the talk. Instead, I was allowed to pick it up from my schoolmates. That did not go well. Perhaps you are already imagining what it might have been like. But it was worse than that. Yes. At one time, I remember being at a scout meeting. Someone told me something about the mechanics of sexual intercourse. I was surprised, for I knew nothing of the matter. And I immediately began yelling about it, excitedly. This did not please the adults in the room. And I did not leave the house the rest of that week. That is my story. Do you have a story as well?
Oh my goodness. There's no way I can follow that up. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I do have to wonder, do you remember what you were shouting?
I do. I specifically remember shouting, Ryan says that sex is when a boy puts his thing into a girl's crack. This was neither accurate nor popular.
Not especially inclusive. Maybe a somewhat meaningful introduction. But,
my source was faulty.
Oh my gosh. That's beautiful.
But don't let me hog the mic, please. Tell us your story. I will watch.
Okay. Watched by death. That's totally fine.
It's been happening all your life.
I'm an atheist. I'm not scared of death. For me, my sex ed was also non-existent. So this is a ghost story. Yeah, I grew up homeschooled, so I didn't have classmates.
Not scared, are you?
To enlighten me. So it was until I was 12 or 13 that I actually got the talk. And it went very poorly. They didn't understand how to make it not traumatic.
Well,
Because
even just that concept of the talk. I mean, I feel like this is a moment we should really step in and point out that there shouldn't be just a singular birds and bees conversation. Yeah.
Right. And of course, it was only in the context of marriage and procreation. And like, there was no talk of pleasure or anything like that.
And of course, we're talking a man and a woman in these circumstances.
Right. Exactly. Very, very missionary style, like the most basic you could get. But combined with the fact that I had been kept in the dark for far too long, and also that it was laden with guilt and shame and like the threat of all of the things that could go wrong, I just remember like being in bed that night just crying. Like, I will never have sex.
Just the concept of it as an idea.
It traumatized me. I was just like, I can't even comprehend. That's awful. I'll never do that ever. Which probably was the end goal of that conversation, was to make me say that. That didn't stick for very long. But at the moment, it was horrifying.
Yeah, no question. It's a wonder why we all have these sexual hangups, why I have so many clients, why so many people feel uncomfortable talking about these things.
Oh my gosh, how about you, Christy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've got a fistful. I mean, I can start off just by very quickly letting y'all know that when I got the talk, it literally started with the phrase, "Do you see those two dogs over there?"
Oh, no.
That is a true story.
Oh, no.
So that really happened. But in terms of in like sex ed in school and stuff like that, I went to a very small, very conservative Christian school. People don't believe me when I say this, but we actually literally went to school in log cabins. It was actually like a summer camp that didn't need their buildings 9 months out of the year. And so we swooped in on that sweet hot deal. It was, so it was everything that you can possibly imagine and so much more. But, you know, I was always kind of a hopeless romantic as a kid. Like, I discovered women at a very young age. I always wanted to date. I was always looking forward to that. And so I had already had a couple of girlfriends by the time I got to freshman year of high school, or maybe sophomore year. And I started dating somebody sophomore year, and word quickly got around, as they do in those very insular, small communities, particularly where faith and shame are involved. And this was at a time where I Kissed Dating Goodbye was all the rage. Spoiler alert on Joshua Harris's work. That didn't really work out well for everybody.
Including Joshua
Harris. But his book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, basically pointed out that dating was something that should only exist as a form of courtship, as a road towards marriage. And therefore, people who weren't in a position to get married shouldn't date. And so that was very much the prevailing sentiment at the time. And so I, starting to date somebody, it quickly became like a problem. And I remember going into my high school health class and having the teacher like really grill me about it. Like, I mean, teachers asking a like 14, 15-year-old about his dating life. And
wait, like in class?
Oh yeah, as part of the class.
Oh my God.
As part of the class. I like had to defend the concept of wanting to date somebody to a professor, to a teacher in school. And as if that wasn't bad enough, it was an ongoing thing. I mean, it was a regular topic of discussion. I was learning then to kind of defend my beliefs and to explain myself and why it was important to me to be able to date and all of this. But this kept coming up over and over and over. And again, small school, I think there were maybe 7 or 8 people in that class. And the truth is, I later learned that my teacher was actually dating one of them. Yeah, my high school teacher ended up leaving his wife and losing custody of his 2 kids, and eventually dating, or had been dating, but then started publicly dating one of my classmates.
Twist ending.
Yeah, a little bit of a shocker there. So, I had some poor experiences with sex ed in school as well.
Oh my goodness. It's kind of also an interesting origin story considering where you are now.
Seriously, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I hope my therapist isn't listening. But yeah, so again, we would love to hear y'all's experiences with sex ed. We'd love to hear your stories. Please feel free to give us a call. We're here at 512-686-0279.
Horrify us.
Yeah, so I've actually already told some of my worst or best bad date stories on the air, so I don't want to bore previous viewers, but I have to say my favorite one is I had kind of just gone through a really significant breakup. I was actually in the tail end of a divorce, and I'm really questioning myself, like, is polyamory a thing? Is this real? Am I fooling myself? Is my identity valid? You know, asking myself all of those questions that I think anybody who finds themselves in some sort of sexual or romantic minority kind of struggles with. Do these adjectives actually matter? You know, is it okay if I identify as polyamorous, if I identify as demisexual, or some of these other things that other people might not see as real?
Yeah.
And might want to take seriously. So I was in that place where I was wrestling with a lot of doubt, and I, matched on a dating app with a lady, and
It's already horrifying.
right. Well, I actually am a big proponent of dating apps, but you take the good, you take the bad. There you have, and so. We go out, and I, from the get-go, I should have just never said yes. I should have never swiped right. I was not interested in her at all, but I was in this place of, no one will ever love me, and here's a stranger who might be willing to spend time with me. And so we go, and I end up getting there, a good ways earlier because I had walked over from work or something, so I had a book, and so I get there and I have a beer and I'm reading a book, and I get down to where it's a quarter empty, and she shows up, and she has her own beer, and before I finish my quarter of a beer, she's already finished her first one. So then we both go and get another round. And I can tell right away, there's just no chemistry. This is not working out for us. But I figure I got to be polite. She made the effort to come out here. It's not the worst time in the world. She's not being rude. She's just not for me. Right. So I stick it out. I figure, okay, I should at least get that second drink. So this is now my third, but our second together. So, all right, we go ahead and do that. And I'm ready to close my tab. And then she gets up, and she's pacing me. She's just throwing them back. And I'm starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to wonder, how am I going to stick the landing, because generally there's that thing where you're on a date where, you don't have to drink at the same rate, but you kind of notice, if the other person is still at the top of theirs, maybe you keep that in mind as you're ordering your next one. That was not going on. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I make sure that my glass is empty and her glass is empty, and I can stick the landing and be well, it was super great meeting you. So we get to that point kind of awkwardly, and I'm all right, how do I say goodbye? And she pops up to get another round, and I was, and she asked me if I want one more, and she said one more, and so I thought, okay, well that implies she's gonna close out the tabs, and we'll be out of here, right? So I say yes, because I figure, what am I going to do? Go home and watch reruns of The Office? I'm super depressed at this point.
Life is short.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going along with it, and so she comes back with that last round, and it's a beer for each of us and 4 shots of tequila.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm sitting here already after 3 beers at 5:30 in the afternoon, just myself really terrified, but not knowing what to say, not knowing what to do. And so I just kind of sip on my beer, and just the shots are just kind of there, and she gets me to do one with her, and she bought them, and I went along with it. So all of these, by the way, are not great ways to date. Like, I want to point out
Right, exactly.
I led myself into this terrible situation by just ignoring so many opportunities to just not do that.
Right.
Like, as soon as she finishes, like, her second shot, she looks at me, and the conversation up to that point had been pleasant. You know, it wasn't particularly interesting. There wasn't a lot of chemistry, but it'd been pleasant. And she just looks me dead in the eye. Her demeanor completely changes and busts into this story about the time where she, in high school, accidentally killed somebody.
Yes.
You remember this moment?
Yeah, were you there?
I was always there.
Yeah. And it turns out into this, like, horrifying story. And at this point, like, I know the date is, this is never going to be a second date, but I'm like, I'm just going to ride this thing till the wheels fall off, right? Like, I'm just going to follow through and see where this thing leads. And so I'm like, I can't leave after somebody makes that announcement. And she proceeds to tell me this genuinely very sad story about being really intoxicated in high school and waking up to somebody trying to assault her, and then explains how she defended herself and the guy died. And so no flies on her. I mean, she didn't do anything wrong in that situation. It was very much self-defense, and that was proven beyond reasonable doubt in a court of law. I think her only real mistake was telling me about it, who she had known for an hour. So, yeah, after that moment, you know, I got married at a very young age. I didn't have a lot of dating experience up until I was in my later 20s.
You're like, Joshua Harris had a point.
Yeah, seriously. So, you know, I went and I called a friend on the ride home, just like kind of traumatized by the whole thing. And he was like, you know, if you thought to yourself a year ago, before you came out as poly, before you came out as bi, before you started going on dates, if you thought to yourself that you were a boring person with no good stories to tell, you're catching up really quickly.
As one does when one gets out of a long relationship.
Yeah. And you're right. Dating apps, mixed bag. Mixed bag.
They are. You have to weed through a lot.
No question.
Many attempts. Yeah, mine also was one of the first dates that I went on after my last big serious breakup.
I think that there's a lesson there, you know, in the sense that when you are coming out of a breakup, especially when you have these kind of false notions of what a relationship should be and what it should mean to you, that, you know, when you get out of that relationship, your identity can be in such a place that you're willing to just take all offers.
Oh, yeah. No, at that point, you're like, well, nothing I thought works. Mm-hmm. Obviously, because this didn't work. So maybe I just throw everything to the wind and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I threw everything to the wind to see what happens. And so this was on one of the dating apps that had actually landed me my last partner. So I was like, okay, maybe it'll work again. Who knows? Saw this guy. He seemed really cute and nice and just a genuinely just like nice looking person.
Sure.
So we're texting, and at that point, I think we were both trying to be sober. So that was also nice. It's like, oh, cool. Like, this is something that we can bond over, and I'm not going to be sitting in a bar watching someone else drink. So we were like, okay, let's go get burgers or something. Mm-hmm. So he's like, okay, I will pick you up in my car, and we'll drive there because I didn't have a car. Still don't. So he comes to my apartment. He picks me up. And at first, I was like, this is going to be a good date because he had brought Sour Patch Kids with him. And on my profile, I had written that I really liked Sour Patch Kids.
Oh,
so I was like, okay, all right, I see you.
That's a good note to take home. You know?
It's a good thing.
Find that little thing in their profile that you can kind of latch on to.
Exactly. And if that had been the way the trajectory went, like, cool, I might be in a relationship. But no.
One good move does not
One
guarantee
good
a
move.
date.
Literally 5 minutes later, we are driving down the highway to get to this burger place that he swore by. And he starts going off about how there are too many liberals in Austin and how the Me Too movement is overblown and bad for men. And how this whole discourse around trans athletes is bad for women's sports.
Oy.
And how it's not a gun problem, it's a mental health problem.
How are you covering so much ground
It was
in
like
5 minutes?
getting into a talk show, like a right-wing talk show like situation. I was like, what is going on? Like, first
Did you go on a date with Alex Jones?
I'm beginning to wonder, honestly. That would be not surprising at all. This is literally first date talk on the way to the date. Like, we're not even like in the date situation yet. We are getting there, and already just boom, 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 every single thing. By the time we get to the burger place, I've decided to make a list because at this point I know for sure, like, no way. But I was also very curious. I was like, how many of these boxes is he going to check? Is he going to check all of them? Because that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. When you find yourself on a bad date, are you looking for your first opportunity to bail, or is it a little bit like a car wreck that you kind of just want to keep watching?
You know, it was kind of both. Unfortunately, at that point, this is like 2 weeks into moving to Austin. So I had no car, no friends, no way to get home.
Yeah, there's no like emergency person to come and grab
I was
you.
and as the date continued, I started getting kind of actually scared because we were eating and he was like, yeah, I just don't get the concept of consent. Straight out. First date comes right out and says that.
Most people, many people don't, but those that don't rarely like recognize or have the verbiage to communicate the fact that they don't understand consent.
Was he wearing an outfit made entirely of red flags?
Oh my goodness. It was all of the red flags. There were no red flags left anywhere in Austin. He had all of them. So I'm there graciously trying to explain consent to this person who is on a date with me. And then he goes on to talk about how like his horrible, horrible past in childhood, like absolutely terrible, terrible stuff. But again, not first date conversation necessarily.
Right, yeah.
Like any one of the things that we talked about, the gun issue or the Me Too issue or any of those one thing, if we could have like an actual dialogue about it, maybe there would have been a second date. But just like everything all at once?
Well, I think that's a good question, actually. Like, how do or when do you bring up politics and some of these other things on a date? Because you want to be spared that fifth date if it's never going to work out. You want to put your cards on the table, but there's also something to be said about, presenting the best version of yourself.
Maybe
of not getting into tricky topics of conversation with a stranger.
Put the cards on the table. Don't throw them at the other person.
Okay, that's important. Yeah.
Maybe. So anyway, finally, he's like, so do you want to go back to your place? Oh, this whole time he's talking about when we are having sex after this date. And I had been very clear, even before I got picked up and was still interested, that like, I don't do first date sex. That's not something I do. And he was like, okay. But then the entire date, he was like, so when we go back to your place, when we have sex.
Oy.
And so I was just like, no, sorry, I'm very tired and I need to go home. And I don't have furniture, which I didn't
tired,
at the time.
I have a headache and an allergy to you.
And also,
I'd like to invite you to leave, please.
5 family members just texted me. They are all dying and I need to go take care of all of them. So he gets up, we get up, we pay the check. He's driving me back home. And we get in the car, but we're still in the parking lot. And he goes, okay, first I want to show you something.
Oh, dear.
It was not a dick, which I appreciated. It was, however,
is it crazy? Like,
almost
I didn't even think about that. I mean, as a person who primarily dates women, it's just never an issue for me. Like,
yeah.
I can't ever imagine a dating scenario in which I've been out with somebody who's just like, hey, here you go.
Oh my gosh. That wasn't like my first thought. That was what other people were asking when I was telling this story. They were like, oh my God, was I was like, no, it wasn't. It was worse. He put on some mumblecore rap music.
Oy.
And he says, I write rap music. And I want to show you some of my raps before I take you back.
That's so great. Okay. Yeah, your story just went from like a B to a solid A.
Oh, it was about reverse racism.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Nothing can follow that. Nothing.
So I'm there in the passenger seat, just like, do not laugh, because this guy gives me major stalker vibes. And like, do not want to make him mad, but also, oh my
So is he himself actually rapping?
He's
at any
reading
point
off his phone, rapping to the music.
while he's driving?
No, we're in the parking lot still.
okay.
He's not driving me home until he does this. Finally, it ends. On the way home, he starts asking me if I'm really bi.
Oh,
And
man.
if it's only because I haven't been fucked by a guy well enough.
Oh boy.
And how his favorite sex position is reverse cowgirl with him on top.
Wait,
And I've been asking people.
doing the math on that, the geometry.
Is that not just doggy style?
I'm still confused about that. To my dying day, I think I will be confused about that.
May involve some strapping and bars hung up from the ceiling.
Suspension style hang-ups. So anyway, that was, he didn't get a second date.
Yeah, I should hope so.
Yeah.
I was almost waiting for like the sci-fi twist where we found out that everybody in this episode was dead and that like you were going to get to the end of your story and then be like, but I don't remember what happened next. And then scary music would play and yeah.
Those are my favorite stories.
Yes. Yeah. I went off dating sites for a long time after that.
Yeah, it's hard to blame you. And, you know, this is certainly a point that has been made before, but it's worth just saying again that I don't think men really recognize how common stories like this are. And how, you know, my funny worst date story is kind of like a silly thing that happened. And yeah, we're all kind of laughing about yours, but there is a very real sense of danger oftentimes in these situations.
Oh yes, it was. That's what made it horrifying as opposed to just ridiculous. Was the sense that like he knows my apartment now, and he knows that I don't have anyone in Austin yet, and this could get bad if I don't play this really well. And like, the part of me was just like, I want to argue with this guy. I want to like make my points and like bring up arguments against this shit that he's saying.
But it feels dangerous to do so.
Right, it does. So, yeah, that's that.
I cannot follow that story.
Well, I paid you back then because
I
your sex ed
feel
story.
intimidated, and that is not something that happens often to death. Well, my story is extremely lame. I went on a date, I suppose you could call it. It was more of a hookup, but we ate first, so it must be a date.
That's the rule.
Yes.
Yeah, if there's any kind of activity, whether it's theater, whether it's consuming food, I mean, anything more than a cup of coffee, I think it becomes a date.
Yes, therefore it was a date, and I enjoyed conversation with her, and so it seemed like transitioning to the bedroom would be appealing. Therefore, we went home to my place. And we began to touch each other in ways that were sexually stimulating. This was good so far.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with how turned on I am by this story as it's being told to me.
As you should be, but it takes a turn that was not as satisfying. You see, when I took her pants off, it became evident that she had not washed her body in any way before our date, or perhaps the week before that. I could not continue. I attempted as best I could to continue being stimulating sexually. However, I was unable, as I was repulsed by the scent and touch and greasy feel of her
that's visceral.
legs and thighs and other parts of her body, and I did not enjoy it anymore, and neither did she at that point, for it was evident that I was no longer enjoying myself, you see. So it ended on an awkward note, you might say. And that is my story.
Oh.
Yeah, I know, I guess, that I'm not alone in having been in that situation where it was like, want to have sex is super exciting, here we are, and how do I gracefully let you know that that's not happening for me?
Yes.
Like, everybody, personal hygiene is a personal choice, and I'm not looking to shame anybody's decision-making with regards to bathing or grooming or anything else.
No.
But I do feel like I have the right to not put my face anywhere that I can't breathe.
Correct, yes.
So how do you navigate that?
It was
I
difficult.
feel like that is exactly what you say.
Darling, I would like to know that I affirm your autonomy and your bodily choices, but I'm going to affirm my choice to not put my face there. Is there a gracious way to do that?
Perhaps at the start, but when you are in the middle of things, I think graciousness has gone out of the window.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's
Yes,
something
it
I
is.
have not had to deal with yet.
Yeah. Never come up.
Thankfully.
I mean, I don't mean to just keep posing the question, but it really does seem like a legitimate problem to have.
Yes.
Odors and everything else. So, I mean, is that really the best way to address it? Just take it head on. Boldness is needed, and you just sort of say point blank, "I'm sorry," until you bathe. I don't want to do this. Is there maybe a sexier way of optioning that?
What I would do if I was interested in continuing, because if you're not interested in continuing, then do not, because then that is no longer positive, enthusiastic consent.
Thank you for once again explaining consent.
But what I would do is say, I'm going to go wash up real quick.
Sure.
Do you want to after me? Or like make it available. Have like hygiene, like wipes or something in your bathroom in general. Especially guys. Do this. Have just some baby wipes.
Yeah.
In your bathroom, if you're having people come over, like, it's a nice thing to
That might be
have.
my number one dating tip, actually.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten so many comments on the fact that I just have baby wipes. It's not hard. It's not expensive.
It's actually, it will leave a mark in a good way with your dates. But yeah, I would say I'm gonna go wash up super quick.
And then, if they don't take you up on the offer, then after you're done showering, you're jumping into those sweatpants and making aggressive
I
yawning
was
kind
so
of noises.
turned on, but then the water was just so hot. I just remembered I had to do something tomorrow, super early.
Yikes. Okay, well, this is deeply horrifying, and I also need a little bit of time to myself to just process my sexual feelings about Serafina's dark persona.
In the end, we are all by ourselves.
If you could just follow me around and say nihilistic things into my ear, that we may need to negotiate that later.
Oh, I will.
But in the meantime, meantime, I'd like to jump on the phones if we can and talk to Rod in Arizona. Rod, you're on the air. What can we do for you tonight?
How you doing, Christy? It's a pleasure speaking to you guys this evening. I've been noticing a major trend going across the secular community on some misconceptions in regards to gender being a social construct, and how some individuals tend to either have this, I've been saying it's a general misconception on what social constructionism is and what it isn't. But before we get into that, can I ask, what do you, in your guys' opinion, what exactly do you guys define as social? Are you guys social constructionists? Do you agree with gender being a social construct? I just love to hear your guys' opinion on that.
Yeah, this is such a tricky one because I do feel like our words are starting to bleed into each other and get mixed up. And we kind of used to keep sex and gender as sort of separate categories. And we recognized that sex was biologically based and that gender was more of a social construct. But these things are starting to sort of blend into each other, aren't they?
Yeah, I would say that we don't yet have any kind of scientific consensus that lets us go to, this is the definition of gender. We have working definitions and ones that we understand more and less, and ones that work for making the points that we need to make about gender. But I would say that at this point, I would go with a social construction type response. But I'm also open to continuing to look at the research and see where that goes.
Yeah, and these things are informed by biology and these other things. And we recognize that our biology isn't just a two-box system of male and female. That it's certainly a much more sophisticated spectrum than that. But yeah, I guess I would agree that gender is a social construct that is informed by biology.
Exactly. Yeah, see, a lot of the individuals I've been running into in regards to social media and stuff, this is social media, what do you expect? But I've been seeing a trend of individuals in where they basically miscue the social construct position as like we're saying that the only way reality is based is if it's socially constructed. So basically, as far as my understanding goes, because I've been taking a lot of philosophy as of late, and as far as where I've been reading, social constructionism is nothing more than a methodology of determining knowledge on how we add labels and descriptors onto things that we see as humans in nature. You know, things in nature exist without any descriptors. Sure. And we as a culture, we as humans, decide what applications, what descriptors we add onto those things we see in nature. And a lot of people are twisting that to make it seem like we're saying that, because I am a social constructionist, by the way, but it seems like a lot of people are twisting that to make it seem like the only way these things exist is through the social process. And that's just not what social constructionism is. And I've been seeing this narrative, this twisting of this type of critique on social constructionists from guys like, and I'm not trying to run through people through the mud here, but individuals like Steven Pinker and a lot of the more centrist, right-leaning type of individuals who are pushing this narrative of social constructionism. Really, that's not what it stands for.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at all of life and you look through all of the creatures on the planet, you will find nothing to say this is a genus, this is a kingdom. Yet these social constructs refer to accurate things that exist in the world. They are not merely made up.
So it's a matter of taxonomy and nomenclature and just where we draw our lines.
These are semantic games that we play to describe things which are more complex than we can speak in a few sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And in case Rod has not been watching, that is death on the line.
It is a pleasure to meet you again.
No, but it's just, I just think it's a big issue because this goes to the core of individuals who are like trans medicalists. people who are have an issue with referring people as non-binary, as trans. This goes in the heart of this issue, because I regard these individuals as somewhat reactionary in regards to their views. They may have some very, very, very common sense, what seems to be very understanding views, but they take this science realism type of ideology, like the only thing that exists is purely based on science. It has no basis on psychology. It has no basis on things we see as humans from our experiences in culture. And they think everything that is based in reality is strictly based on that. And that's just not how it works. And that's the problem I've been seeing. It's a huge problem. I've had discussions with people online, some prominent members in this mentality. And another issue this comes up is when it comes to transmedicalism, is like I had a discussion with someone about the subject of transmedicalism, for example, and I'm a very critical person in regards to this methodology when it comes to what is a trans person or not, because the major reason why I have a problem with this is it excludes other people that may not have gotten a diagnosis for gender dysphoria. They're saying that you're only trans, for example, when it comes to the social constructionist viewpoint, you're only trans if you have gotten either a medical diagnosis or you have gotten a diagnosis and you're transitioning. Yet there are circumstances, I guarantee a lot of people, all of us know, there are places in the world where people cannot either financially afford to get a diagnosis or cannot afford to get a diagnosis based on the region area, especially in the Middle East, or they can't transition because of medical reasons. Maybe they have a heart problem and the HRT transition would affect because, HRT reduces your blood vessels and stuff and has an effect on your cardiovascular system. Maybe they can't transition that way. But they still would make every definition of being trans for when it comes to protections, legalities, and stuff. But it just seems like these individuals want to have an exclusionary policy against these individuals, which would put them at a huge disadvantage in society. It's scary for me that this is where a lot of skeptics' mind frame is at, and I don't know where to go from there.
This viewpoint that you speak of, the worldview and paradigm where one does not need to look into things deeper, is very convenient and very reinforcing of prior beliefs. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it must be popular among people who wish to hold their previous beliefs, even if they call themselves skeptics. It merely means to them that they have seen the truth, and they cannot be convinced of something without very specific criteria. And those criteria are not always accurate.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and this is something that I see in my office all the time. I mean, this is true. I actually spoke to somebody recently and am commissioning an artist to draw up a couple of graphs for me to put in my therapy office, and included in that is a bimodal distribution.
Right.
Everybody can go and Google what that phrase means real quickly if they're interested, but a bimodal distribution basically is how our gender tends to map when we map it out. It's not just two boxes of men over here and women over here. They're asymptotic, which is to say that bell curve, that statistical graphing, doesn't ever reach zero. So there are people who are dead in the middle. There are people who are at the top of what we'll call the feminine curve and the masculine curve. And there are folks all up and down that line. And I guess I would tell you, Rod, the best way I've been able to describe it to people is in talking about color. Asking somebody, is this purple? Is this blue? Is this violet? Because all of those things are real things. We can, like Sarah pointed out with regard to genus and species, we can acknowledge that we're mapping these concepts onto something that's actually there. But the culture that you're in, the way your eyes work, the lighting that you're standing in, all of these things dramatically Yeah, all of that dramatically affects whether you see something as purple or violet or blue.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah,
dress.
see, I think
Damn
the big-
dress.
That goddamn dress.
No, see, I am a social constructionist, but see, one of the biggest, like, even my own critiques of social constructionism I have is in reference to people that make the claim that everything is a social construct. That is generally true, but it's also not true in some regards as well. For example, I'll give you a prime example of this. If you look in nature, if you look at the scope of the universe, the reason why things become a social construct is the labels and descriptors we add into things. But if we make a claim, 100% claim, that everything is a social construct in the universe, this is not true, because there are things in the universe that we have yet to see or have been able to pick up in nature that we've been able to add in descriptors. So it is generally accepted everything in the known universe, things that humans can perceive, is a social construct, but not everything in the universe. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
I would say so. I think it ties neatly into the concept of classical. I think it's idealism, and the concept that there are like ideal forms of things that are out there somewhere. So like. I have 2 rings on my hands right now, and the concept of two does not exist anywhere. It is a social construct that we've created, but that still means that there are 2 things on my hands, and that remains the same whether or not we use the word two to describe them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely concur with you on that. So that's pretty much what I want to address. I just wanted to get your guys' take in reference to this. I don't know how you would describe it, this phenomenon that's happening in the secular community. It's just, to me, it's disturbing because, again, this is something people are using as some form of weaponized concept to go after or speak against people that are either, social advocates relating to this subject, and they are using it to try to exclude themselves. Or to me, I'm gonna put it bluntly, and I'm not gonna try to be very mean here, but I have to put it bluntly. I think, to me, at the end of the day, it's the individuals who push this narrative are trying to make them or appease the people that are bigoted toward them. They're trying to present themselves in a positive light toward these individuals. Like, oh, I have a legitimate reason. And they're trying to pander to this demographic of people that have showed them hatred this whole time. And they figure that the only way that they'll ever be accepted is to show the same hatred they showed other people. They claim they don't hate people, but realistically, they may not generally in principle, but they generally do in regards to excluding other groups. And I think that's just, it's easier to find acceptance on a general hate of another group if you have a hatred. It's pretty sad for me. It goes against secular humanism, but what do I know?
That's a really good point, and I agree with you. It's something I read this book, Victory, and it was a description of the gay rights movement from the 70s through the 2000s. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. But one of the through lines was that at the beginning, at Stonewall, at these first riots and these first moments of, hey, we deserve this equality, there were trans people right there with everyone else doing the thing and making these strides and being these important figureheads. But as they slowly became more and more embraced by the mainstream, the people who did not fit certain stereotypical norms were pushed away to leave the group respectable. So cis, white, gay men, and to an extent, cis, white, gay women were then ushered into the back room, like, okay, fine, you can come in, but you have to leave everyone else out there. And so, yeah, it is an ongoing issue that in order to gain the credibility and respectability that the masses will give certain people, you leave others behind, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the events like you've just mentioned historically of Stonewall, it's still going on. I mean, there was a recent group. I'm not going to name drop here, but there's a recent group that formed up that legitimately removed the concept of transgender or transsexual individuals from their label, and they're doing this to exclude these individuals from their group. And again, to me, this is a huge problem because every one of these individuals may not have a similar world experience, but they share a similar situation when it comes to, advocating for the same rights and protections that they all need in reference to fighting against any form of issue that may come when it comes to legality, when it comes to rights, treatments, workplace protections. The stuff that I'm talking about, and it's sad for me that, like I said, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's just people are trying to find acceptance through hate instead of acceptance through unity, and it's sad for me, but I don't know what to do. So yeah.
In many ways, our social identity is formed not by our concepts of who and what we are, but of who and what we are not. And so we must separate ourselves from the other. It is a tragedy of our psychology.
You're saying very important things, but I just applaud your commitment.
I'm just curious, Death. What do you identify as? Do you define yourself as neutral, or?
I am the end of all.
All right, guys. Like I said, I just wanted to get your guys' feedback on this. I greatly appreciate your information. Hopefully, this narrative eventually goes away, because I feel that it's incredibly harmful. We should all be fighting for equality for everyone and not trying to, appease a specific group. I know you guys can't voice too much on your political opinions because you guys are 501c. I respect that as well. But I do, like I said, appreciate your guys' take in reference to what you guys could answer. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. That was a really good observation.
Yeah, no, and very well said. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your call,
Thank you.
Rod. Be seeing you.
Thanks, guys. And Death, don't come for me anytime soon.
Perhaps.
Nice.
All right, guys. You guys take care.
All right,
Yep.
you too.
For anyone out there watching, Science Vet has a really good Twitter thread on bimodal sex and gender and all of that.
It's actually included in a post that I wrote for the ACA during the kerfluffle, and so that's available on my website, which is just vcatx.com. But Science Vet on Twitter, I think it's at ScienceVet2, is it not?
It's so popular that you can Google Science Vet. Sex and gender, and it'll pop up first result. I have it bookmarked because I give it out to so many people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's an important thing to be able to find strength in numbers as opposed to finding strength by subdividing infinitely into different groups with competing agendas.
Well, and I've pointed it out before, but it's worth saying again, the reason we use LGBT is because we put lesbians first after recognizing for so many years that gay men were not including lesbians as legitimate or as actual members of the queer community. And the queer community, really like all marginalized communities, has a long history of not necessarily respecting all of its members, of when there are not enough resources, when there is desperation, when there's marginalization, we tend to grab whatever we can, even if that means shoving other people out. And, as you go down the acronym of LG, you look at bi and how bisexuality was really not seen as legitimate by mainstream public until, even in many places still, bi is just a stop on the way to gay town or whatever
still half
else.
in the closet.
Right, all of that kind of stuff. And, as we get to the end of the acronym, we see the T. And I, on the one hand, want to recognize everything Rod is saying is being very true, and I'm horrified by the violence and the other constant news stories and issues experienced by the trans community. I'm also very hopeful that the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that there is pushback, the fact that there is, like inflammation, and the way fundamentalism comes out whenever there's progress on these types of issues. I see it as a good sign, even as it is a really terrible thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that a lot of people in the skeptic community have deconstructed a certain part of their worldview, the God part, but they haven't necessarily done the work that they need to do in other areas, and they are still living in a very religiously influenced culture, probably working through viewing things through a lens that was given to them by maybe a religious family or a religious past. So yeah, I think I would just encourage skeptical people in general, don't stop with one question.
Yeah,
it's a
question
way
everything.
of being. It's a way of viewing the world. Get more information. And if you feel like you have a concrete yes or no answer, that's a good sign that maybe you need to do more research, because there are very few concrete yes or no answers out there.
Sure. On that note, we talked a little bit about, I guess, sort of the horrors of online dating.
Yes.
Death, you had a online dating horror story for us.
What I have is a message that was sent to someone. It was unprompted from someone that had not introduced themselves on a website of kink-related phenomena. It begins thusly. Hello, name redacted. How are you? I have found your profile, and I find you are very handsome. I would like a little bit right with you, and many more. What I search, a woman for conversation and sex. I love bondage and I love forced orgasm sessions. I want you as my slave for forced orgasm sessions. I will bound you completely defenseless. I want to stimulate your clit very intensively. I will use dildo and vibrator or other sex toys. I want to lick your pussy and your clit, and I want to fingered your pussy. You should come to orgasm. I observe
It's like
you.
it was written by an AI. I will use vibrator and dildo to orgasm.
I observed you at the orgasm. If you get a very hard orgasm and your body is being shocked from the orgasm, I watch you and do simply continue. I am relentlessly. You must take the orgasm. After your orgasm, I give to you not a pause, but I stimulate your clit pussy directly to the next hard orgasm. When your pussy is dry, I take oil and continue. I let you come again and again until you can take no more. Then I give you a little pause and continue until you can really take no more. I love it. I love to see when you convulse from the orgasm. If you maybe squirt, it never becomes boring for me. I will see the reaction from your body of the orgasms when you come again, when you have very intensely orgasms. I love it when your body is being shocked and convulsed. I will see how many orgasm you can take. I am nosily how many orgasm you can take, and I want you to pushing at your limits and beyond. I hope that you have a very good endurance and that you can take very hard orgasms. When you're in my sessions, then I decide. You can say that it is enough or too hard for you, that you can take no more. You can beg me to stop. No chance. Remember, I decide. Maybe I stop after your orgasm, but never for or in the orgasm. When I preparing an orgasm, then you must take the orgasm. I will have a very, very long session with you with many hard orgasms. And I seek a one for dunking plays. Dunking in water. A example. When you lament too much, I dunk you in water, that your head is underwater, again and again until you are a good girl that take what I give. Or I dunk you in the water when I stimulate your clit pussy. Or when you become an orgasm. Or I dunk you to my fun. You like this? But we can also make without dunking. I hope that I have not shocked you with my message, but I think that you like it. Right back.
Just an entire conversation with himself. Also, I don't.
Oh my God.
I mean, I am obviously a sex therapist. I do this show with y'all. Like, I don't think of myself as shy. And I tell my clients that it's very difficult to make me blush. I don't know I've ever heard the word orgasm used so
many
gratuitously. I'm a little uncomfortable just with that word now.
It started sounding funny.
Oh my
Funnier than
gosh.
it does. I kind of like the sporadic German accent that crept in every once in a while.
I really appreciated that they made sure to include so many rhetorical questions and then immediately answer them. I will decide.
That is beautiful.
That is a particular piece of poetry, but I guess I just want to also acknowledge again to the men in the audience that I don't know a woman who hasn't gotten that message, who's gotten some version of that message. I mean, if you log into FetLife or Tinder or any of these places where people tend to meet to talk about sex, just out of nowhere, unsolicitedly, bam.
Oh my goodness. I feel like that needs to be a thing. Like, you need to go on the road with that.
I decide.
The I Decide tour. Dunking optional. Oh my gosh. I unfortunately do not have anything that intense.
I have one again.
It was very visual. I'll say that
It's
again.
very visual. And like good for that guy being comfortable
Yeah, if that's what you're
expressing
into,
himself.
that's
But
great.
maybe next time ask first.
Yeah, it again comes down to the concept of consent because even if this is purely fantasy and he gets off on just writing out these scenarios and these details, you didn't consent to receive that message. And again, just being on a dating website, just being on a kink website does not imply consent. It doesn't matter what alleyway you're standing in. It doesn't matter what time of day it is or what you're wearing. It's not consensual to even send a message like that without, checking in on some level.
Exactly. My funny horror story about being female presenting on the internet comes to you from from a fan of certain shows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, our YouTube comments are not always
There are some interesting
place to
people
hang
there.
out.
Yeah.
We made the mistake a couple of weeks ago of encouraging a viewer to ask their question and then to check back into the comment section to get responses.
no.
I will not be doing that anymore.
no.
That was a poor decision
That
on our
was-
part because
yes.
that particular episode had a cesspool of commentary.
Oh, goodness.
We do very love and appreciate all of our viewers. We do love and appreciate people who leave comments, and we do go back and read them, except for when we just decide that we cannot.
This particular person, who will go unnamed, had a complaint about the setup of the studio.
Did it not show your boobs well enough?
We have these microphones, you see, and they are placed awkwardly. They are placed awkwardly because they don't.
We talk into them.
They don't show our hands. They obscure our hands. I was very confused, and I made him explain to me, well, what about the placement of the mics is so bad?
No one's ever complained about my microphone blocking my hands, I will point out.
Right? I was like, what is this? He said, oh, I can't see your hands. You miss half of the show. And I was flattered because apparently My boobs are half the show, guys. But that was a recurring comment that happened across. I'm not sure if it's the same person in different names or multiple people complaining about the fact that we have high quality sound equipment.
What is just breathtaking about it for me is that if you are watching YouTube, you are on the internet. Like, you have access to naked breasts. If you are on YouTube,
Or hands.
yeah,
Or hands, if that's
like,
your
it's
thing.
right there if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I don't understand who's trying to who needs to get it here necessarily. That's not what this show is for. But yes, thank you for watching, I guess.
Watching perhaps too closely.
Oh my goodness.
We appreciate your like and subscribe.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, well, I don't have any of those kinds of stories or experiences. Certainly, I've had some bad online dating stuff, but I guess to just give y'all a little bit of a, I guess, more inspiration here on Halloween, I wanted to tell y'all about my best, I guess, spooky date. You know, whether it's Halloween or whether you find yourself dating a nice goth lady or, you know, whatever the occasion might be, there's actually a great organization here in Austin, and I looked it up. They're still around. They seem to have expanded and are doing great. Haunted ATX, hauntedatx.com. Not a sponsor, but just a really cool group. They have a couple of hearses that they have they have converted into limousines, and they will come and pick you up. They will drive you around town. They will get you absolutely schnockered in the back of the limo as they drive you around, and they just take you all over Austin, telling you these incredible ghost stories. And yeah, as a skeptic who does not in the least bit believe that there is a ghost living in the attic of all of these bars,
Death is the end.
yeah, I got to go to all of these bars while somebody drove me around and told me really silly stories, and it was just an absolutely great time. I got to play like sort of a spooky playlist as we were driving around, and it was just nice having a chauffeur entertain us for what was actually a really reasonable price. So I recommend, it's you know, Halloween is kind of wrapping up, but if anybody's trying to extend it throughout the weekend or whatever else, it's a very, very good time.
Extend it. Excuse me. That's fun.
Yeah.
That is really fun. I grew up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, so I am well versed in the ghost tour. That sounds really fun, though.
Yeah.
What kind of is it, like historical ghosts about Texas's and Austin's past, or is it more just?
I mean, it was all. Well, let me start with it was all bullshit, but it was fun bullshit. But it was you know, plausible. It would be, we went to this particular restaurant that I'm sure many viewers have been to downtown that was built in the 1800s, and we were actually able to have access to go down into the basement, and it was just a very beautiful historical building. And there was some silly story about how the owners had like died in a fire and how sometimes servers still hear them late at night. And, you know, I don't buy that part of it, but it was still a lot of fun. There's a very historic bar here in town that used to be a brothel when, you know, Austin was like still forming as the state capital. And so we got to hear some really silly stories about how you can still see the ghosts of the one madam that was murdered on the security camera.
Brothels are hotbeds of paranormal activity.
Yeah, apparently so. I think it's because of all the murders.
Probably all the
which
murders.
Really means we should start asking ourselves why we associate death and sex work so closely together. That's maybe a more problematic thing to illuminate there. But overall, yeah, it was just a real blast. So if anybody's looking for a creative, sexy, scary idea.
End to
highly
October,
recommend.
ride around in a hearse.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds awesome.
Agreed.
You always ride a hearse, though, I'm imagining. That's your general mode of...
All of you.
Yeah, I was about to say, doesn't write. It's just always
Just
there.
always
just
there.
always there. Well, with that, we thank y'all so much for joining us tonight. We want to make sure that y'all keep the conversation going, that you join us on Facebook, on Discord, as well as some other exciting things we have coming up.
Yeah. Let me pull it from your notes.
Oh,
there.
sure.
We started a Twitter account. So we now are on Twitter. We share stuff from other people who are sex positive and funny, and we'll post links to all the videos before they go up, so you guys have a front row seat.
Information about tweets from previous guests. I've noticed you've done a lot of those.
Lots of promos for upcoming guests.
Yeah, people who are coming up. So if you are sort of curious about these names that we mention as we talk about who's going to be on next week or whatever else, that's really the best place to get that information.
And that's at Secular Sex. The full name was too long. And we also are going to be premiering a new concept, which we're excited about. We are going to have a voicemail box set up so that if you are maybe not comfortable calling the show in real time and being on live air, because that is a little bit nerve-wracking, you can call in and leave a question about sex or gender or expression, and we'll play them on the shows. And then talk about them on the air. And that number is not the number that you call in from. That is 512-666-0275, 512-666-0-ASK.
Yeah, and we get emails all the time from folks who, say that they're not able to watch live, that they've been wanting to call in, and oftentimes they'll send us an email and we'll email back and forth. Sometimes we like to read those emails over the air, but it's a lot more fun actually if we're able to hear everybody's voices. So
Yeah.
if you're nervous because you're afraid that you might trip all over your words or whatever else, I mean, we can clip and edit those things down if you need to call in 5 times because you want to make sure to get it just right. I mean, we certainly understand that it can be a little nerve-wracking to talk about these things. I mean, how many phone calls have we gotten from people who are hiding in the bathroom or in the garage or the basement because they don't want to be overheard, but they wanted to call while the show was on. So to those people, just wait till everybody goes to sleep. Give us a call at 2 a.m. We'd still love to hear from you. So hit us up at that number, 512-666-0-ASK.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, with that, we want to say thank you again for joining us. We want to encourage you to enjoy the rest of your Halloween, to I guess, steer clear of death, and to go out and give yourself a big ol' orgasm.
Or give someone else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.